This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 377. I am your host, Lauren Gray, and yes, I am not wearing my proverbial branding shirt of hospitality marketing. Instead, I am wearing, in support of this month, since we're at the close of the month, Real Men Rock Pink. So I wanted to make sure that we are always ever present of the things that we can help our society with, our community, and those that are faced all too often with tragedy and medical conditions and so forth, such as what supporting women's breast cancer is all about. So with that, I want to get into our discussion today. We spent a fair amount of weeks actually talking about budgets for 2023, the processes of discovery, the processes of aggregation of data, the process of assimilating the data, interpreting the data, and then creating quantified budgets from that, strategies as it were. We talked about new tools. We talked about all of the fun things of anticipation. I would say a lot of the fun things of anticipation of 2023 and what come to changes in that. But I think as these past two shows have represented, there is a shift in how we do things. And it isn't a shift about just which channel to spend money on or what we do for metrics associated with that channel per se, as it is about the modalities of our marketing engagement with our guests. How is it that we approach them? And I have to say that historically, we have always done things in a very systematically similar way. As often I used to tout, old school techniques in new world technologies. There is still fundamental ways that we do marketing that are based on ways that have worked long before the internet was in existence, long before there was mass media, long before there was TV or even radio. There was things that were done that solicited people to purchase. Whether it was a big sign over a wagon with a horse going into town selling snake oil to a town in the West or whatever. These things were used. And there was a process of this, of the discovery of a product, the validation of that discovery, the education to get that validation, and the eventual decision to actually purchase. Like, for instance, the snake oil description I just made. The guy was wheeling with a sign saying this was the world's greatest tonic. There was no way to validate it outside of his statements. He would create some exhibition of how it went from 90-pound weakling to a 300-pound stout band lifting iron bars and so forth when they were all fake props and so forth, whatever. And this validation process, this discovery of, I didn't know this product existed. Here's this product, but is it really is it doing what it says it's going to do? There's some validation to that. Then I'm going to buy it. And then there's the follow up to that process of, does it do for me what I wanted it to do? And was I shysted, or did I actually buy a product that was helpful? In our marketing strategies, we have relied upon, and as time has moved forward, progress and technology and so forth move forward, we've relied upon the markers of what we do. We rely upon the calculations of what those markers represent. I equate this a lot like radar. Before radar, and I'm a big buff of a history buff when it comes to World War II and so forth, there was a very definitive difference between how the superpowers at the time handled their technology perspectives. We know that the Battle of Britain, the de-emphasis of radar for the Germans compared to the emphasis of radar for Britain, was a turning point as to how they were able to succeed in defeating vastly superior numbers of planes because of their ability to be taking their small resources and put them in the right place at the right time, because radar was telling them where these planes were coming from, the Germans were sending it from. In Japan, for naval power, they decided early on that radar wasn't going to be a component connected to their guidance of their naval vessels for shooting mortars. So even though the Japanese had actually larger battleships than we did, or at least more powerful guns and so forth, and actually larger ones too, they were limited by line of sight as to where they could calculate where they're going to be shooting from. So their battleships had very high, what was called pagoda towers. And these towers had viewers to be able to look around and see where they were wanting to tell the gunners to shoot to. It also limited their ability to shoot at night. They couldn't shoot a target they couldn't see. And even when they did begin to add radar into their boats, they weren't using it to actually measure the guns. They were using it to verify something, but then they had to translate that to an estimate for the gunners to use. And shooting projectiles is a very precise thing. The US, on the other hand, and the Allies, integrated radar into the mechanics, the analog mechanics associated with shooting guns. and a variety of other things that they did differently. But the key element was that through that assistance of radar, their accuracy of target hits was substantively better than the Japanese in the Pacific Ocean. So they were able to create much more devastating effect to potentially superior vessels, but definitely larger vessels, where the other vessel was a hit and miss. In the world of how many shots did actually land versus how many shots almost landed, was critical as to the success of a battle. Why do I bring all this up in hospitality marketing? Because our rationale of marketing is very similar to this. We have progressively gone off of what markers are. Let's go back to the radar analogy. We see this in our weather forecast all the time. Little arm runs around. Actually, it doesn't really do that much as in that way anymore. It's pretty omnipresent as it does this, but it has a focal point that runs. And in that process, we see a progressive mapping of what it's in the range of the radar for. Until that point of reference comes back around again, that last image is the image that stays. And then when the radar arm comes back through, it updates that image. We do that in marketing. For instance, when somebody touches our advertisement or touches our websites, it's a marker for us. There's somebody. And at that point, we do what we have historically done. We put them through a decision tree. Did they buy something when they touch us? No. Well, what did they touch? Well, if they touch that, then we need to reconnect with them and over inundate them. And I say that really realistically with repetitive ads to keep them focused. Like, hey, come back here, look at our stuff, look at our stuff. Until such time we convert them or we irritate them and they just leave out of disgust of the oversaturation. And all of us have faced that with retargeting, that we go to a website and we get 15 flavors of whatever. Retargeting afterwards, and it's annoying to the point that even if I did want to buy the product initially, I certainly don't want to do it now because you irritated the heck out of me for chasing me all over the internet with your ads everywhere I go. So we do that, and then we measure metrics. What did we spend doing all this, and how much money did we make from doing this? ROI, and we've talked about ROI in comparison to trend and pace as a variation to the value proposition what ROI represents. ROI, return on investment, is a strong measuring stick. Unfortunately, I think it's an overinflated value measuring stick because it doesn't always produce the most successful campaigns if that's the only measurement that's being used. Sometimes the pace and trend of your campaigns is more important as to the potential path of success that they represent than they do of the ROI calculation of how much money do we make by this point, and was it worth it to keep doing? And we cut off a campaign that was probably being good and building towards a higher success because it didn't keep hitting the threshold of return on investment. All of this is a wonderful lead into what our topic today is. If you had wondered where we were going with all this, our topic today is, why is intent and engagement analytics the new thing? And I would say, better to say the intent and engagement analytics / marketing, the new thing. And I say that with air quotes because always we talk about new things and so forth. We often get caught up in a lot of buzzword functionalities before we actually understand what those words truly represent. They're a terminology that's been that got bridled onto something, and we refer to it as if there's a knowledgeable component, like big data. Oh, that big data thing. We went through the buzzword of big data years ago, and all the potential what big data could be, and where we're going to do all this big data, and what does that really mean for us in big data? Well, I wouldn't say so silently, but quietly. It's been begun to be used by the organizations large enough to use it, because we did recognize that big data required big capabilities to handle big data. I mean, I'm being a little dramatized, but yes, Google is one of those great representations. Google has they're probably the poster child of big data for all of the information that they have about us, of all the things that they know pre, during, and post of our engagements with anything. So what does that mean to us as marketers? Well, we traditionally discard from the wheat and the chaff of what we do. And then that's a metaphor for the fact that you take a big pile of stuff that you just harvested. There's a large component of it that you don't eat, the chaff, and to keep the wheat, the kernels that you grind with, make flour, off to the side. That's the part that you harvested all this for. The chaff gets tossed. We have that mentality with our marketing. 97% of people come to our website, don't do anything that we find valuable. So they just get tossed out. We're only focusing on that 3% perhaps, or 2.5%, or 2%, or 1.8%. It gets very small very fast. Of the people that actually engage and seem to have some relevancy of value to us. All of our money that we spent to get 100% of the people to us is all focused on that 2-3% of people that are actually engaged with us or respond to what we're engaging them with. But all that data, and we talked about this last week in show 376, is still there. We discard it as just general traffic, total volume of traffic, total bounce rate, total page duration, number of pages, generic stuff, just to give us credence that our website it's out there. It's being seen by these many people, but these are the only people that we're really focusing in on. Well, all of that data is valuable. There is no data that's not valuable. It may be apparently irrelevant at a time. It may not be correlated to something, but it has value for some other purpose. As the chaos theory goes, the butterfly wings and the hurricane on the other side of the world kind of mentality. There's a correlation to these things. Google is getting closer, Adobe is getting closer to the understanding of all of the moving pieces. Mentally, as humans, we try to bring things down to a singular market. We try to think of terms in individuality, a market of one. We do this in our marketing styles. If anybody knows and familiar with the acronym of SMURF, it's not a little blue person, as I say in my conferences, that shows up your front desk. It's a categorization we make of people based on what they represent as a business types. Social, military, fraternal, religious, all of those categorizations are SMURF. They're categorizations of people. Somebody coming in for a wedding or a fraternity or a reunion. They're the categorization we make of them. That's a classification. And the reason why we do that is so for us to mentally understand what the purpose of their relationship is with us. We do that. Artificial intelligence, computer algorithms, machine learning don't have those restrictions. They don't need to condense data. And the reverse is actually the more data, the expansion of data is what helps them understand things, not the reduction of data, not the overclassification and simplification of data. We know very quickly that if we keep homogenizing people into these categories, these silos of identification, we dull the details about their individual wants, desires, and needs. So we've been very focused on our individual marketing of how can we get to that one person that is really the most interested? Who's that person that's really going to buy from us, stay with us, purchase things with us, so forth and so on. Data, big data, and we tried to make big data answer those questions. How can we get to that one person? It was the wrong question. It's how do we better understand what everyone's doing to know how to do what we've been doing all along, and that is to make sure that we resonate with the people that are most interested in what we have. And that comes from the 97% of the data that goes to our website that we don't really use. That goes to all of the data of things those 97 or 100% of the people did prior to them coming to our website. And what did they do afterwards? And those terms of what all of that is now being called intent and engagement. Intent is prior, engagement is post. Okay. So think of it as a timeline, if you want to think of it as a linear perspective. Intent is what Google has been guiding us through this entire time. When they took away our keywords and when they changed the name from Google AdWords to Google Ads, is to let us know that it's not so much the words that are being used, which we were fixated on, like how can we optimize for showing up for downtown or something, as it was, and this is where they've spent so much of their time with technology and their development of their computer systems and their analog and their algorithms, is what by combining the words was the intent of the user. What were they looking to do? Okay. And then from that, what did they engage with? So let's put these things in terms that we've talked about recently. We talked about YouTube ads and so, especially on the podcast, we were talking about YouTube tools and ads and things like this. And we talked about the fact that the new Google EVCs, okay, which are the engagement aspects of what their engage view conversions. Okay. What this is doing is one, it's more directed to one of the aspects is that it allows Google to explain why they charge for some interactions that don't actually function as an interaction in our historical sense, a click. Okay. So let's talk about the fact that I do a video ad. And we've all seen the variety of video ads on YouTube, and there's the skippable part, and there's the I gotta watch it part, and so forth. And there's all different types of ads, and they have different prices and so forth. But so I get a view and call it an impression or whatever, and they see it, but they don't do anything with it. And maybe they skipped as soon as they could, and I didn't get charged for the fact that they skipped it out. Or they watched the whole thing, but they actually didn't do the action I wanted them to do. They didn't click on anything. I still had to pay for them to see it. I got viewership, but I didn't get engagement. Okay, that's frustrating for me as a marketer because I've spent money that wasn't realized in an ROI perspective. But through that process, Google is now saying, well, we kind of know where they came from before. Not kind of, they do. And we know where they went afterwards. And we know their normal search behavior. And what happened after they saw your video about beaches in Cancun is they went from looking for sweaters for winter to beach resorts or beach vacations in the back. Because of that engagement, your campaign actually created an impact on them. We didn't see it from the click, which is our traditional way of seeing a conversion value or a result from our spends. But Google saw the engagement that it created. It may have actually engaged them to look at us from a different perspective. Maybe they went to TripAdvisor to look at what we were talking about. Maybe they went to a destination site or Google Maps or something else that was related to what our ad was about, because Google does know what our ad is about and knows the targeting that we did for the ad and so forth and so on. And so that engagement was a worthy impact of our video. Now, of course, we can get charged for that, the engagement view conversions. How, in a roundabout way, did they eventually get back to us? If they got back to us, creates a cost factor to us that isn't as simplistic as just saying they clicked on the little thing that you told them to click on. That's not where this came from. So engagement views have a whole new value to the idea of our impact on that stream of conscious that all of the people that engage with us have. And the video view is just an example of this. Let me flip over to another. We're all familiar, if you've ever done Google Ads, you have gone through the threshold of Performance Max, which is that one section where it asks you, what are you building this ad for? You know, are you building it for sales? Are you building it for leads? Are you building it for web traffic? Are you building it for conversions, products, events, apps? It asks you all these, there's these panels of things, choices for you to pick on. And if you're not familiar with how each of those things work, you don't know which one to necessarily pick on. So you kind of go default of, well, I want more people to come to my website. Okay, I want that one. That may not always be the best one. Okay, first off. And of course, we have FOMO, fear of missing out. We're like, all of a sudden, did I pick the right one? Shouldn't I pick the right one? So now I got to make other ads on the other ones to see what difference those are. And yes, you should. But you should know more about what each of those panels are doing. One of the things, excuse me, sorry, that's coming up is that the Performance Max platform is getting yet more tools, even as we speak, as of for right now. They're enhancing certain things because this is a time of year that they get to go over and figure out if their systems work. For that reason, they're doing things that tool-wise, like their performance planner, because they have so much of this data, you can create, and you've had this testing capability, the testing ground for your ad campaigns already. This is, okay, if I were to make these ads, it's kind of like, reminds you if you ever took economics in college, where if you had the economics professors love doing this at the beginning of the semester. It's like, okay, we're going to give you $5,000, $10,000 fictitiously, and we're going to ask you at the beginning of the class sessions here to invest it in what you think will produce the best returns for you. Yeah. And at the end of the semester, part of your grade goes towards how successful were you in your investment strategies. Same too with the testing modules for Google Ads in their testing mode is and their labs, let's put it that way, is that you create these ads and you let them run, and it tells you how much you needed to spend or should have spent for what you need for visual, what the anticipated, based on real traffic that they would have engaged with, because they would have been placed because of that. And it gives you the anticipated values of those campaigns to give you a sense of whether or not it would be worth it to actually invest in. Google's expanded that into the Performance Max programs, where they now have Performance Max Planner, where it actually, rather than having to wait on real time, let it run for a few weeks to see what the result of the lab would say, this actually has now become advanced that you can simulate the campaigns instantaneously. Here's my phrases and keywords and strategies and topics that I want to run with. Here's my ad variations that I should run with. It'll give you suggestions for that too. And then it'll actually calculate in front of you what the anticipated value of what you're saying should be done, could be done, would generate for you. That's very impressive, because now, instead of what we've historically done, which is saying, okay, I'm going to create this wide casting net of ad groups and ad types and variations and multiple filters and so forth. And I got to run it. And we've always said this on the show. We've talked about this as strategies on the show. It has to run 72 hours at least. And then you cull out based on certain thresholds of ROI so that you cull down to the core of the ad sets that you've created to be the most high producing ones for the monies that are being spent. It's a strategy we've been doing for years. Now, we really don't even have to do that with Google. We can create the mockups. They'll help you create the mockups and then actually show your optimized scheduling that they can do for you. It'll give you insights as to where it was leaking, as to what you should add to the ads so that you didn't add to the ads. Maybe you should recommend what you should do for offers. It is taking this data and making it easier for you to calculate what you need to do as a strategy before you ever drop a dollar. Now, we've talked about on both the podcast and live show tools that have done this for us historically. We use them quite regularly, like OWOX, where it's a wonderful work funnel that you can create your values and your traffic in, and it'll show you your leaks, and you create loops to go back and retarget, and you create loops of what you're missing and channels that get shifted to, or which channel aggregates the data. Just, it's a great workflow, and it creates a theoretical revenue potential for it. Google's not doing that for your ads. Why are they doing it now? Because this is season for retail. This is fourth quarter holiday. So this is a chance to test out their model to see if it's producing at the levels of accuracy that they believe will be sufficient for it to be successful. So you can take advantage of that right now. And that has a lot to do with engagement. It's talking about how the impact of your strategy isn't about the recognized conversion of they clicked on a button that I told them to click on. Going back to my earliest discussion of radar as to why I brought it up. Until that radar bar comes back around and re-identifies what it showed you in the first time it swept, okay? That's what we've been historically doing, is we get these markers, okay, that say, here's your conversion, here's where they touched, this is where they clicked. And from those markers, those moments that we see that data, that engagement, okay, it creates a continuation of actions from us based on what we think the next dot is next. Okay. They did this, and now there's 5 variables instead of 20 variables above it. Where else are they going to go? Well, we have to plan for this. So we have to retarget them. They're going to go off to other websites. We need to make sure we have a retargeting campaign. They might go into this section of our website. We need to create a generated offer of incentive if they lag too long on our website. We need to put them into a CRM funnel so that we have continuous conversation with them, because their window of interest is 6 weeks out. So we have 6 weeks of frequency that we have to put into the campaigns that's built into the workflow. These things are what we do with these markers, like a radar that comes around. Bloop, it changed. Bloop, it's over here. If it went and changed in a different direction that we hadn't planned for, we have to adjust for that. Okay, if it's a worthy consideration to do. What we have now is a continuous feed of information. Okay, kind of like our new satellite systems are for weather. We are watching in real time the progression of a storm. We're watching in real time a progression of a front. We are dealing with real time data, real time being within a margin of, seeing the data, transmitting the data back down, filtering the data, and getting it out to us, minutes of, but compared to blips of radar and so forth. So it's as if, going to the World War II analogy I mentioned at the beginning of the show, it's as if we had a satellite watching the ships move and knowing exactly where they were every moment of the time, and just telling our forces exactly where to shoot and where they're going to be at, because we can see them going that way. So it just seems like it's spooky that we know all this information about them. That's the world we're now entering into, this perpetual understanding of intent and engagement. We're knowing, via Google's help, that what these people have been doing cumulatively to the point that they interacted with us, and we know with Google's help, the impact that we had on diverging their trajectory. Kind of like when we knocked the little orbiting asteroid from the other big asteroid just recently, as my NASA did. What's our impact on what they were doing up to and then after their engagement with us? So the Google Performance Max program is a realization of that in real time right now. This isn't a theoretical, this is coming down or when this happens or so forth. This is happening now. This is now. This is you going right now to Google Performance Max, go into the program and learn from it. And we're going to cover it more in depth on our podcast here today as to the functionalities of how this works in a way that you can monetize your marketing strategies with this. But the other one I want to bring out is I want to focus a little bit now on the intent conversation. That data is harder to define because just like literal multi-language translations, it translated the word to to the language we wanted it to, but the intent and the meaning of it didn't transfer with it. We know from even our English language that the combination of words is more important than the words themselves. It's how the intonation is, the voice of it is, where the comma lands in our dialogue, how that word was in reference to another word. There's more nuance than the literal translation of a language. Same too with intent. The literal path tracking isn't the data. It's understanding what that intent or that path direction or its inception, okay, again, of intent and pace, okay, is affecting the trajectory of the person. We know that just because they saw our website about beaches and they diverged their path and looked at beach vacations and or getaways and so forth, doesn't mean that they are buying a beach vacation. They might have found information that precluded them: price, dates of availability, not sure where they want to go, all those variations to that. That it doesn't mean just because we did impact their trajectory that we are that they're going to buy something from us. It's about what does it mean that brought them to us? What does it mean after they touched us? And whether or not we can influence later on from that intent to engagement, what we can do to bring them back to a point where we can solicit and purchase and have them purchase something from us. That is where the intent program gets a little hard to identify. I say that because there's now trying to understand beyond what Google offers. And please understand, with Google GA4 and so forth, this is what the transition of GA4 is all about, is gathering all the data and then understanding what the data is telling us rather than trying to granularly find the data that we think is the most relevant. We talked about this in show 375. It's a flip of the switch. As Google flipped the way we do marketing, it's a flip of the switch. Instead of looking through the data and sifting the wheat from the chaff to find the thing that we want, instead it's gathering all the data and having it tell us what we need to know. It's a really flip of the coin. Okay, intent is in that realm of what we don't know yet, because it takes trajectory. It takes time to understand the influences of what somebody was doing versus what they ended up doing. And intent data is a very large macro number that doesn't work well with the description of ROI. Okay. Return on investment is not a strong marker to intent marketing, because a lot of what you do doesn't have a direct net effect. It doesn't, because at a certain point say, well, we only had to spend that much money to get this much money back. No, we had to spend this much money this long before we had this much back. Kinda. We had to spend this much money and look what we resulted from the initiative. That is a farther, longer line. And I know it sounds all the same, but it's about, I've seen so many campaigns that had limitations of budget that were highly productive, very valuable, could have continued on, if not expanded their value return, that were shut off because somebody at a level of importance enough could say, that's all we budgeted for, so that's all we're going to spend. And I've literally had conversations with them that said, for every dollar you're giving me right now, I'm giving you $20 back. And yet you're saying, oh, gee, I ran out of dollars. And rather than go to the bank and get more dollars, you're saying, that's it, I'm done. That's the mentality of, I'm sitting there going, you're losing sight of the purpose of what this is for, rather than the conditions of what you're doing it in. And that's where budgeting turns limiting. If you look at your budget as hard lines that say that's the amount of money, yet you'll free range conversion or commissions with OTAs, where as long as they're feeding you revenue, you allow that check to continue to make bigger and bigger numbers that you're paying in commissions. If you see it in that perspective, but don't see the perspective of shifting and saying, wait a minute, let's go and diminish our function with them, or augment even their function with them on OTAs, and let's loosen the reins up on this budget and continue money. Let's find money to put into this while we're still able to make this money. Because the idea is, if for every dollar you're making $20 back, which is realistic, things like metasearch and things like this, then let's make all that money, because then we can refill the coffer that we're saying we're depleting from something else to do this with the money we make off of this. And say that instead of getting 20 to 1, we got 10 to 1, because we took half of what we made in revenue resources and refilled it in budget stuff that we shifted from other places that wasn't allocated to this, but we needed the money to fulfill our opportunity with this channel, Metasearch is a good example. Okay, and we'll refill their coffers. And yeah, it does reduce the ROI, and it doesn't make it such a rock star story, but it does, because if you look at the end result of what is the top line contribution of things, rather than whether we fall under a constraint of budget of percentage ratio values and costs, then you're clear on the purpose of why you're doing this. It's about the generation of top line revenue. Operationally has to handle the flow through. Okay, strategically, business operations, administration operations have to consider that we have this money in the bank. What does it go towards, the costs and things about it? And how do we make sure that there's a yieldability of this, that we're just not willy-nilly buying things because we're giddy with the money that's in the bank, that we're objective and very pragmatic about our spending strategies based on constraints at that point. Absolutely right. But the idea that you're going to limit top line revenue growth because of a inaccurate ROI calculation based on intent marketing that is about data that is driving people, it's hurting larger people towards you that don't necessarily create immediate conversions, but they do create a larger impact to this. Think of it also in terms, because I'm famous for analogies, that you're thirsty, you can dip a cup into a moving river beside you and get a drink. Next time you're thirsty, you have to dip the same cup in to get a drink. But if you were to create a divergence of the river to an area that brings, over to your farmlands to irrigate your water grounds and so forth, or create a pool of water, which you now can put a pump to, and you can always have water whenever you want it, that's a different story. The same goes with what you're doing. Just because you're having a short-term success with a particular channel and you limit yourself saying, well, that's all we have budget for, so that's all we're going to do. That's just a cup of water. It's the idea that it's about the ability to redefine how you're getting top line revenue in a way that is a flexible, interpretive, non-only ROI way of looking at it. So again, going through intent and engagement as new ways of doing things, it is because this is the representation of data. It's the fact that we now have a large, incredibly large amount of data that is being used by Google, by Amazon, by others, to show us all of this large flow view, this live view of how things are going on. Here's the negative caveat to this. We don't own it. It's not ours. We have to literally, in the GA4 environment, ask the right questions of Google to give us the right data that we're looking for. It knows all this data. Well, I should say it has all this data, and it can interpret its data based on its motivations. But until you start quantifying your requests of the data, you're not going to know what the data is telling you. And that's the crux of GA4. We lose the hard data, okay, the spreadsheet data, so to speak, into the interpretive data of, hey, Google, we're looking for this. Tell us what this intent is and so forth. And Google is already trying to make sure that we just become more reliant on them by doing the Performance Max updates, which says, hey, look, the more you identify what you're trying to do with us, the more we can do it better for you. That's literally what Google is doing. Okay, they're hiding behind we want to be your best number one assistant and so forth. The reality of it is reliance breeds cost, breeds value, breeds the expense of having that. Okay, so that is the drawback. So you have to begin to think about what it is you want from this and how well you can ask the questions of Google to be better than your competitors. It's not about how much you can make a better mousetrap. It's about asking Google how many mice you want to catch. And it sounds weird. Okay, so again, this is thinking more in terms of workflows and funnels, about looking at the intents of things and the engagements that you're creating and the value of that entire process, more than saying cost and conversion and ROI and value proposition of budget and so forth and so on. So I didn't mean to make this so short in relationship with this, but I did want to go over and bring that up so that we had a good picture, because it is a bit of a deep thought, and I don't want to keep beating a drum on this one. I want people to think about the idea of what new intent and engagement analytics and marketing strategies are, especially going into 2023 as this data becomes more usable, as we in the middle of next year, July, have to now really rely on GA4 more than Universal Analytics. Although they did just bump the fact that those people that bought Google 360, where they were going to be cut off from updates as of October, they bumped it now another year to give them more time. And understandable. One, Google doesn't want to cut off a money source for themselves or create data issues for the people that provide a lot of money for them. And there is a lot of logistics associated with migrations for such large companies that use GA360 because the data is so massive and the variations of what the data is used for is so massive. People tend to think that Google Analytics is just what they see on their website. That's like a little stripped down car compared to the Maserati that a GA360 account has with its full spectrum of data and so forth. So interesting for that. Trying to make sure there's something else I forgot to say about that. Oh, workflows and files. I want to get back to that. It's, again, something that I think is not used as much as it should be, but needs to be ingrained into how you begin to perceive things. You have to begin with this idea of engagement and intent and so forth, a kind of a cause and effect relationships. And I don't mean by add, click button conversion. I'm talking about flow of awareness, engagement, divergence of trajectory from previous to their engagement, value proposition of assessing all of the data, not just those people most likely to purchase from you imminently. You'll be able to do that already. It's about how do you begin to engage in other ways with the people that didn't need an immediate gratification of purchase and acquisition. That's a more challenging component to it. So we'll go over to some more detail. And today we're going to go into the Google Performance Max program in the podcast. We'll get into some great details about it. I'm looking forward to Tim Peter, actually, and it's really a rare privilege where he doesn't often have guests on his podcast. I'll be joining his podcast, I think, in the next couple of weeks to discuss the metaverse. We've had that show. We've had a few shows on metaverse, VR, AR, and what it may mean to our industry. I'm looking forward to the very excellent dialogue that we usually Tim provides and being on his podcast, because I think I am the antagonist in that dialogue. I'm more of the optimist about the VR component than an AR than he is, and it'll be a fun comparison conversation. So his Thinks Out Loud podcast I'll be on in the next couple of weeks. We'll, of course, address the topic again afterwards in the post-discussion here. So look forward to that. For everyone today, thank you so very much again. Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Please be mindful of that. Just don't let it pass. It's just something you see featured on NFL with when they're wearing pink gloves or something. There's a real value to participation and support of these projects and programs. And there are a lot of other ones, not just the more highlighted ones like this, but keep these in mind as well. So with that, thank you for everyone that's watching us, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thank you everyone for their participation on the TV channel. Thank you for that, which is on Roku, Amazon, and Google TV. Also, for everyone that's joined us with Hospitality Marketing Club, it's an advanced club for people that are in the industry doing what we do for marketing. It's not a beginner's club. It's a peer group that people that are already professional and are aware and knowledgeable of how to function in this space. We're not there to teach people about what digital marketing is or whatever. You already know it. You now have advanced questions. You have these discussions we have here on the show are just a tip of an iceberg of discussions we have on the club. Why I bring that up is that being a member of the club, go to hospitalitymarketing.club, sign up. There's actually a little quiz for entry. You have to get 9 out of 10 the questions right. If you don't, you can always continue to try. But the idea is that we only want people that are comfortable in conversations beyond the basic level. Plenty of people out there teaching basic stuff. Don't need to do that. But there's only us teaching advanced. So they get to join the Hospitality TV channel for free, the paid gateway, but the live show here and software and services are always on the free side of the channel. Just look for it on your smart TV, Roku, Google, Amazon, and Apple, and Roku, and sign up for the channel there. And if you want to catch up with our podcast, by all means, Hospitality Marketing Podcast. You can find it on 39 platforms and counting. So I'll find us there. Sorry, rambling a little bit. So thank you, everyone, for the privilege of your time today. My name is Lauren Gray, and I look forward to talking to you next Friday for show number 378. Until then, thank you, and have a great weekend.